Hey everyone! I'm Albert Boris. Donkey Kong Country Returns is kinda average.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I don't want to say that this game is bad, because it's definitely a solid 2D platformer in its own right, but that's also kind of the best I can say about it. I played this game in its entirety on the 3DS 3 years ago, and recently got myself the original Wii release for that purpose too. But safe to say, I left both experiences feeling kinda unfulfilled. And I'm saying this as a die-hard Donkey Kong Country fan. I grew up playing the first 3 games a ton through the Wii's Virtual Console, and I adore the Tropical Freeze as well, despite being very different in many ways. So the fact that Returns disappointed me as much as it did makes me kinda sad. And well, considering we've been getting a lot of DK products lately, including a remaster for this game last year, I figured this might be a fitting time to talk about it. And that's why today I'm gonna go over my full thoughts on Donkey Kong Country Returns, and see where it fails but also where it shines. Again, I don't dislike this game. Don't take this review as a full-on rant, and if you're thinking of getting this game personally, I say go for it. But yeah, with all of that being said, I say let's get started. Okay, so first off, in order to properly understand my feelings towards this game, you kinda have to look at it for what it is, a reboot. See, the Donkey Kong Country series, despite starring one of Nintendo's biggest characters, wasn't developed by Nintendo. Instead, that was done by British company Rareware, whom Nintendo kind of owned. Unfortunately, that didn't last forever, as shortly after the release of DKC3, Nintendo ended up selling Rareware to Microsoft, partly because they failed to make enough money for them, effectively putting the Donkey Kong Country franchise to a halt. It also cancelled a bunch of other DK projects, but that's besides the point. It wasn't until 14 years later we'd finally see a new installment, as not only did Miyamoto want one, but so did Retro Studios, who had grown fatigued from making Metroid Prime. So BAM! New studio found! Obviously, since it had been so long, it made sense for their first Donkey Kong game to take it a bit easy, and the result was basically a reimagining of the first Donkey Kong Country, but still with some differences. Unfortunately, this also causes the game to feel rather uninspired in identity, and the worst part is that the changes we do get, sadly, all kinda suck. Not just compared to what we had before, but even on their own, they're frankly unpleasant. Anyways, let's talk about the problems now. Let's start with the levels, and more importantly, the world structure. Good god, is it generic. In the simplest terms, Donkey Kong Country Returns is kind of the new Super Mario Bros. Of the series, when it comes to this aspect. There are exactly 8 worlds in the game. They also follow the basic themes like jungle, beach, and cave. And by the way, the volcano world is the last one. So yeah, Super Mario might wanna visit! Okay, but real talk. The fact that the world themes are so cookie-cutter isn't the main issue, although it certainly contributes to it. It's the fact that within the worlds, there's barely any variety either. Because as soon as you've played one level there, you basically know exactly what to expect from the rest of the area. Let's take World 2's beach for example. 2-1, beach with platforms. 2-2, beach with cannons. 2-4, again with cannons, but from the background now. And 2-6, it's the same as 2-2, but oh, there's an auto-scroller halfway through, so it's totally different. Fortunately, the last 2 levels are substantially more unique, but we didn't need this many similar stages. By all means, they should have just been combined with each other to make less, but overall, more memorable levels. Because when basically the same thing gets repeated over and over again with only minor differences, it starts to become boring and formulaic. Why couldn't we have an underwater stage, for example? And this is all as if the themes and world names weren't unoriginal enough. And it's not just World 2 that has this issue. World 3's Ruins is even more samey, and World 4's Cave, as another example, consists exclusively of minecart and rocket barrel levels, when we only needed a few. Even World 5's Forest, which is in my opinion one of the more fun areas, too gets repetitive. Because outside the spider stage, every single one of them has a gimmick revolving around swinging, and I couldn't tell you which is which. And that's not to say that this game doesn't have any unique stages. And at the very least, there aren't really any bad levels. They're all decently made. But when I can't remember 85% of them after just beating the game, that's a problem too. It only barely tries to solve this issue in the last 3 worlds. The factory in particular is where the game truly gets to shine, because in spite of the overarching theme, for the first time all the levels feel very different from one another, both in aesthetics but also gameplay. But at this point it's kinda late to salvage the game, and uninspired soundtrack does not help. Most of the music themes are recycled directly out of Donkey Kong Country 1, with only minor differences. And while I get they wanted to strike some nostalgia, personally it comes across as pandering, and it just makes me want to play the more timeless first game instead. And sure, Donkey Kong Country 1's levels weren't perfect either. Yes, it also has some uninspired themes and stages, but at least there was variety between them within worlds, so even though not every stage had a unique gimmick, they still felt different from one another. In World 3's Vine Valley alone, for example, you had 2 forests, 1 temple, jungle, underwater, and even an Ewok village stage. Plus the levels in the game itself was much shorter, so nothing overstayed its welcome. In comparison, Donkey Kong Country Returns is a lot longer, so the repetitiveness gets old much quicker. The most varied a world got in Returns was in the 3DS and Switch exclusive bonus world, and even then that was only because each of its 8 levels were based on the previous 8 worlds in theme. Besides the factory stage where you built a robot, they were all otherwise very standard design-wise. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I really don't care for the rocket barrel levels. It's like they tried to take that one secret stage from the third Donkey Kong Country, but then combined it with the Geometry Dash plane transformation, and the result is a pretty slow and boring auto-scroller, that relies more on trial and error for its difficulty. I guess it's to provide a contrast from the more high-thrill minecart stages, but while it does offer some variety, there are better ways that it could have been approached. Anyways though, the problems with this game unfortunately run a bit deeper than just the level structure. Next, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is where we see some of the more noticeable changes to the game, and in all honesty, almost nothing better came out of what we got.
Oh, come on. There's gotta be something you thought was better, right?
Actually, yeah, you're right. The minecart levels are way better for one, because even though you die in one hit now, the fact that the screen resolution is way wider than it was on SNES means that you actually get time to react to what's coming up ahead, unlike in this bullcrap. Anyways, let's get to the bad stuff now. Let's get the most obvious out of the way first, Diddy Kong. This guy is not a character in this game, he's a power-up, that lets you hover up in the air for a bit. In the first Donkey Kong Country, Diddy and DK were equals. They were both separate characters you controlled, and they each had their own benefits and drawbacks depending on who was up front. And even though the characters changed with each game, the gimmick stayed, and the balance it brought gave you a lot of agency for how to approach each level. DK was slower but stronger, but Diddy was more swift and agile. But now, it's just DK, and Diddy is an add-on, which removes his individuality and makes the gameplay more basic and predictable. And no, Dixie Kong being added in a free update for the game does not mitigate this core issue. If anything, she just makes Diddy useless like she did in Tropical Freeze. It also doesn't help that on his own, DK's controls are not the best. It's not bad by any means, but he's a bit slippery and slow to get going with, which is a far cry from his swift and snappy self in the originals. But then as soon as you get Diddy's hover ability, it becomes way more manageable, which in my opinion is kinda cheap. Imagine if Luigi became a power-up to Mario as well. Okay, he kind of was in Brothership, but that's besides the point. The motion controls, I don't mind though. I know a lot of people hate them, but they feel natural with the abilities you use them for, namely the roll and dunk slam. Even if blowing is the stupidest thing ever, what's even the point of it? But even then though, the 3DS and Switch ports offer regular controls, so who cares? But yeah, my problem here is that Diddy feels more like an animal body now than his own character, and I don't like it. Speaking of which though, I wonder how the animal bodies are doing. Wait, what? What happened? Yeah, so if you don't know, these were kind of the power-ups in the original trilogy, enhancing the gameplay in different ways. For example, Rambi was a powerhouse, On Guard made swimming easier, and Winky could jump really high. Sometimes, these critters even had their whole levels dedicated to them. If anything brought gameplay variety to these games, it was almost certainly these. But yeah, they're gone, basically. The only one to really return is Rambi the Rhino, and even though he's arguably the least dynamic of them, even the 4 levels he's in get way more of an identity with him. I'm not saying these guys had to be in this game, but considering how samey and repetitive a lot of these stages are, the addition of them really would have helped them stand out more. Technically, Squawks also returns, but instead of letting you fly around and spit coconuts, this time he just tells you where to find puzzle pieces. That is, if you buy him in the shops. Yeah, so let's talk about the puzzle pieces, because they're probably some of the most useless collectibles I've come across in gaming. See, in each level, there's around 5 to 9 of these hidden all over, either behind hidden walls, in bonus rooms, or they sometimes drop if you collect all bananas in an area. Sometimes. And what do you do with them? You unlock images. Yeah, that's your reward. It wouldn't be so bad if it weren't such a slog to get them. because not only are they sometimes hidden in the most cryptic places possible, but the fact that there's so many of them between levels means that you're more likely than not gonna forget which places you looked in if you replay them. And the bonus rooms are boring to slog through as well, because it's always the same objective every time: collect all bananas. The only thing that changes between worlds is the background, otherwise there's only a total of like 5 to 6 different layouts that get repeated. So thanks Squawks, thanks for nothing. To be honest, it also feels a bit weird that you can buy him when by all means he's DK's friend who would help him out no matter what, but I digress. Now, I shouldn't be this harsh on these puzzle pieces because at least they aren't required for 100% completion, but when the game still treats it as a main collectible and gives it so much focus, I think it's worth pointing out, because it's useless padding that leaves me unsatisfied. And the fact that you can't retry the bonus rooms if you fail unless you restart the level is so annoying too. It makes me even less motivated to get the puzzle pieces. I don't want to keep comparing this game to the SNES trilogy, but come on, why were so many things better there, including this? Thankfully, there is another collectible too though, which does actually contribute to unlocking more levels. The Kong letters. Basically, grab the K, O, N, and G in each stage, and you eventually unlock a secret stage in that world, and beating all of them unlocks the final secret world. And I'm sorry, but these collectibles are bad too, just in another way. They are way too easy to get. In 99% of these cases, the letters are all visible in plain sight for you to grab. I guess they wanted the challenge to be how you'd reach them, but even on that note, it's a joke, and the only time I actually had to sit down and think was for the G in 6-3. The secret stages themselves are fun challenges, and among the game's hardest levels, even if their similar themes get old after a while. But the journey to reaching them should have been more fulfilling. In fact, now that I think about it, why not just swap the purposes for the Kong letters and puzzle pieces? The latter are obviously way harder to find, and as long as we decrease the amount you need each level from 5 to 6 to more like 3 to 4, that would be way more rewarding. That would actually incentivize exploration, and make reaching the temple levels way more rewarding.
Dude, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze has all of these elements too. Why is it suddenly not a problem for you there?
You know, that's a good question. Yes, it's true that Tropical Freeze shares many of these same issues as well, being a direct sequel and all, and while I still don't like them there, the game usually tries to make up for it by introducing other gimmicks as well. There is more Kong variety, the level design is interesting enough without animal bodies, and the Kong letters are actually kinda hard to get at times, just as a few examples. It doesn't absolve these issues, but it's a patch on a flesh wound, if not at least a step in the right direction. Although on the other hand, the puzzle pieces were even worse in Tropical Freeze, because now the bonus rooms didn't even change the scenery between worlds, but I digress. Anyways, lastly, there's one final thing I'd like to go over in this review, and that is... the characters. Or well, okay, I already talked about Diddy Kong and the animal buddies, so the only thing we really have left to discuss are the villains, the Tiki Tong tribe, and also this head. Now, I don't think the Tikis are awful, and I appreciate that Retro Studios try to come up with some new villains, but they're just so boring. I don't want to sound like a spoiled millennial, because I'm not a millennial, but really, the Kremlings were better. They had simple, but still iconic and expressive designs, with lots of variety between enemy looks. And they also struck the perfect balance between goofy, but still dangerous. Meanwhile, the Tikis are inanimate instruments come to life. All the enemy grunts look basically the same, they're hard to take seriously, they look stupid, their names are stupid, and they show no expression at all. I feel absolutely nothing when I see them. They're just objects. Oh yeah, and they can hypnotize others to do their bidding. That sounds cool, but it's completely wasted. They only use this power at the start so they can steal DK's banana horde, which by the way is just the first game's plot again, and also on the bosses, because I'm sure there couldn't be any other reason they'd fight you. It just feels like a cheap way to make them seem more dangerous. And whatever interesting plot events there could have been with this disappeared when they decided the Kongs are immune to this. And this is also why I still like the Snowmads in Tropical Freeze, because they actually have an effect on the story and levels you play, with the whole ice theme going on. In contrast, the Tikis could be replaced by the Kremlings and nothing would really change. Otherwise though, the bosses themselves are fine. Nothing special at all, but they do the job, even if most of them are kind of boring or basic or both. Nothing to write home about. The final boss in particular kind of underwhelmed me. You just avoid his hands, jump on them a few times, and then a few more on his head. That's it. Imagine how cool it would be if instead Tiki Tong actually hypnotized Diddy, turning him against you. That would be like, you know, an actually interesting use of these villains? Ah, whatever. However, the worst character has without a doubt got to be Professor Chops. Seriously, what the f***? fuck is this random pig? He looks completely out of place compared to everything else, and it doesn't help that they don't even do anything with him. He's just some guy who waits at you for the checkpoints. I really shouldn't hate him as irrationally as I do since he's clearly harmless, but you know, there's always that one thing everyone dislikes for no reason, and for me, it's this guy. Like, oh my god, does he look so stupid and ugly. It's not even a funny kind of stupid like Kiddy Kong, because he's such an irrelevant character that doesn't do anything important at all. Professor Chops? More like evil Dr. Porkchop. Wow, I think I went a little off the rails there. You know what, ignore that last section. But yeah, I think that's about everything I wanted to say about Donkey Kong Country Returns. After all I've said, it's definitely by no means a bad game. Even though the world themes and levels are repetitive and uninspired, they're perfectly solid on their own. And even though I think every change from the originals is worse, whether it's the lack of animal buddies, looser controls, Diddy irrelevancy, reused soundtrack, boring villains, and heck, just about the lack of originality in general, nothing is unplayable. The fact that it still has plenty of fans shows that. But overall, I'd probably give it no more than a 6.5 out of 10. Just alright. Nothing I'd ever really want to go back to, unless maybe a decade or so has passed.
Nah, we all know you just hate this game because it's not like the originals.
Dude, did you even follow any of what I said?
Search your feelings. You know I'm right.
Anyways, that's all I wanted to say for this video, but remember that this is all just my opinion. What do you think about Donkey Kong Country Returns? Did you agree with me or not? Let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on the game. And in the meantime, make sure to like, share and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this review, and stay tuned for more videos. Follow me on Discord, Twitter and Patreon for more updates as well. And I'll see you all soon. Until next time.